Hello, my name is Kevin White, and today we're going to be discussing the demographic transition model. And in this model, we're going to take you stage by stage through stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 to give you an understanding of how countries throughout history have developed. And we're talking about population development. We're not talking about economic development here. So not all countries in the world are in the same stage. Currently, we have countries in stages 2, 3, and 4 throughout the world today. And when we look at these various stages, you're going to see a lot of different variation in birth rates and death rates. And hopefully by the time we finish, you'll have an understanding as to why some countries are still over here in stage 2, while others are in stage 4, and even still some in the middle in stage 3. So let's go ahead and take a look at our big question over here on the right. So our big question is, how did our population explode to 7,341,336,701? So that's an extremely large population. And if you take a look over here at our world population, 1960, our population was only 3 billion globally. So most of this has happened in the past few decades. Most of our total population globally is very new. It's fresh. So why is this population explosion taking place? And to explain this, we're going to use some colors. So for death rate, over here on the left, if I'm talking about death rates, we're going to mark that in red. If we're talking about birth rates, that will be marked in blue. And then our population growth as a trend line will be marked with the black. So when we talk about these different rates, everything will be measured per 1,000 people. All right, so per 1,000. The reason why we use 1,000 as opposed to 100 is if we used 100, it would be a percentage. And the numbers that we have per 1,000 are already pretty low. So we would end up with numbers, if we had percentages, it would be a number like a 1.4, whereas if we bump it up to 1,000 with that extra place value 0 that we're adding on, you end up with a number like 14 and 16, which sound a lot further apart than 1.4 and 1.6. But really, that small difference is very substantial when you look at overall population growth. So that's why we use the extra 0 for this particular scale. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at stage 1. And when I talk about stage 1, we're talking about primitive, early agrarian societies. We're talking about subsistence farming, hunting and gathering. This is thousands of years ago in most cases. So there are no examples of whole countries still in stage 1 today. So let's go ahead and talk about death rate for a bit. Now, our death rate in stage 1 was right about here, fluctuating ever so slightly. A little bit of variation, but you can see the trend line is relatively consistent around 40 deaths per thousand. 40 deaths per thousand. Now, if we talk about birth rates, inversely, the line moves opposite of the death rate, but also remains pretty consistent right around that 40 mark. So, what does this mean for overall population growth? In black, you're going to see the line that I'm drawing over here. Pretty consistent straight across. Where would you see variation along this line? The same places you would see variation here, up above. All right, so let me pick out two examples here. Over on the left, if you have high birth rates and low death rates, what does that mean for population? That means you're going to have a little peak right there, right? Whereas over here, if you have high death rates and low birth rates, that's going to mean that you have a little valley or trough right there. All right, so you will see some variation along these lines, but the trend is relatively consistent and stagnant. You have stagnant growth, very low growth coupled with high birth and high death rate during stage 1. So why is this, you might ask? Well, people are having lots of kids, but unfortunately a lot of their kids end up dying. They have high death rates. And the explanation for this is correlated very strongly with why death rates fall off in stage 2, as this drops off substantially. So our death rates drop off in stage 2, as our birth rates remain relatively consistent right around the same marker. And then what's going to happen to overall population? Well, if you have a death rate that's declining and the same number of people being born, that means that your overall population is going to grow. And in this case, it's fair to call this an explosion. All right, this is a huge explosion that most countries in the world have gone through, and the reason for it, why is our death rate dropping off so rapidly, right? You see it's dropping off very quickly. So why is this happening? Well, you have things like access to medicine, medical technologies, penicillin, the concept of washing your hands, sanitation. All of these things are contributing to the declining death rate. So people are living longer, fuller lives. And then up above, people are still having very large families because historically, right, if you look at stage one, they had large families because they needed them for that agrarian society. They needed farm hands, they needed people to help hunt and gather. They needed that large population of children to help work the farms and in the long run help them by taking care of them when they get old. So they continue having large families throughout most of human history because they see an economic benefit to it. However, as the death rate in stage 3 continues to drop off, death rate is still declining, and by the time we get to the end of stage 3, you can see right here things start to level off. However, our birth rate in stage 3 drops significantly, very rapidly, and then levels off along with our death rate. So what does this mean for population? It means it's going to continue to grow, but as the birth rate tapers off, so will our growth rate trend line into stage 4. So why now have people all of a sudden decided to stop having so many kids? Went from 7 or 8 kids per family, now 5, 4, 3, until we finally get down here around 2.1 replacement, right? So 2.1 kids is what's needed for replacement. And why the drop? Well, people no longer have a need for large families, right? They really didn't even need them in stage 2. Towards the end of stage 2, they didn't need them, but it took them a while to realize it. And now in stage 3, they finally have realized it's economically advantageous to have fewer children. So that's the reason for this sharp decline, is people realize that in the industrialized world over here, it's very expensive to have children. So they plan. They use contraception, they have birth control, and this is widely available, and now the population has dropped off significantly as a result. So, stage 4. Let's continue on with our death rate, and you guessed it, the death rate is actually going to level off. And then our birth rate is going to also remain relatively consistent with a little bit of fluctuation and variation due to economic prosperity. This down here might be like the 2008 crash, recession right there, and then followed by a period of prosperity after it. So you will see some variation, but not much. You see a pretty stagnant line going across there. And then our overall trend for population growth will be almost exactly the same. And let me go back here. The population growth will be very similar to our birth rate line. It's just going to fluctuate ever so slightly but remain consistent with pretty stagnant growth. So why did we move from here to here? This is answering the big question. So take a look at what contributed to this. When you have low death rates and high birth rates, this caused our population explosion, right, during stage 2, and continued on through most of stage 3 until finally we see things leveling off, right over here. And even still in stage 4, the space between our death rate and birth rate means that there is still population growth happening in stage 4, but it's very, very small. However, if you have a large population, even a small growth rate means big numbers over here. And to make that even more impactful, in stage 3 we still have so many countries throughout the world in stage 3, and even still a few countries in stage 2. So some examples of countries in stage 2 today would be, let's see, Egypt, Kenya would be examples of stage 2 countries. In stage 3 we have countries like India, right, and we have countries like Brazil. And then more developed countries in stage 4, you have the UK, France, United States, and so forth. So the reason for our big population explosion is explained by the demographic transition model and the variation of birth rates and death rates that all countries go through. All right. Thank you so much for watching.